Father Mateo was busy preparing for the service when the door opened loudly. Isabella, whose world had been turned upside down in the past 2 hours, entered wearing torn clothes, blood on her pants, and a piece of leather in her hand. The coins glittered in the sunlight like burning embers, but they were about to reveal the secret of a criminal who had been hunting the entire village. The priest took the coins and a slip, written in ink. "Thank you for letting me enjoy myself for 2 hours. I don't want to get this fun for free. I'm paying for it." Now these coins were the burden of a reality that had destroyed everything. Father Mateo says, "Boil the water so that there is justice. Boil the water so that the criminal is punished. Will there be justice? The criminal will be caught." A story based on a truth that will touch your heart. So let's move on to the story. The midday sun shone brightly in the middle of the sky, illuminating the golden streets of Hispalis. The markets were filled with laughter, the sounds of instruments, and the hooves of horses. This was the time when Hispalis, the modern Seville, was breathing its golden age. Tribal chiefs and local rulers ruled, and an artificial calm prevailed everywhere. Beneath this calm was a village, peaceful, beautiful, and seemingly safe. Here lived Isabella, the mayor's only daughter. Her innocent eyes, her milky complexion, and her golden hair seemed to be made of light itself. The villagers affectionately called her the Light, because wherever she went, light would spread. In the midst of this light stood Father Mateo, the village's Christian priest. His clothes were simple, his face calm, but in his eyes there was that fire that does not tolerate injustice. He was not just a religious leader, but also a leader of the people, a friend, and sometimes the last hope. But every village has a shadow. Here was that shadow, Diego, the butcher, who always had a sharp knife and smooth talk. He laughed, gave everyone cheap meat, but Mateo's eyes never recognized him as completely innocent. It was as if smoke wrapped around him, something that was not clear, and that suspicion was going to become reality one day. As bright as these afternoons in Hispalis seemed, they hid as much darkness in their chest. And this afternoon, when the sun was shining at its fullest, that darkness was going to take on the form of truth for the first time. Isabella's life was spent in the lush valleys and fragrant streets of the village. Her beauty, gentleness, and goodness of heart were widely known in the village. She would come to church every morning with her shining hair tied up, where Father Mateo would always see her as a kind-hearted and good-natured girl. People considered her smile a source of joy, and wherever she went, a peace and light would spread. Every woman in the village wanted her children to have a kind heart like Isabella. But one day, under an old tree in the narrow streets of the village, Diego appeared. As a butcher, he often talked, laughed, and joked with the women of the village, but there was a strange light in his eyes. When he looked at Isabella from afar, his eyes would become wet, as if he wanted to trap an innocent victim in his net. Isabella would sometimes ignore him, but a shadow of unseen fear would always sit in his heart. While touching the village's layer of prosperity and peace, some strange events began to occur. One day, a woman disappeared from the village, without a trace. Then, an unusual writing was found in an old book, which contained some obscure words. Do you want to know the truth? This writing was not left by anyone on purpose, but it was the same to understand and ignore it. Something was wrong, but no one took it seriously. These were trivial things, but their impact was profound. As every street, every step taken in the village became shrouded in mystery, both Isabella and Father Mateo began to realize that something was about to happen that would now be impossible to stop. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a golden glow over the vast fields of Isabella's family farm. It was a peaceful afternoon, the kind that felt like it was filled with the scent of wildflowers, and the distant hum of cicadas filled the silence. Isabella, a 22-year-old young woman with a heart as pure as morning dew, had come to the fields alone to tend the crops. Her long auburn hair danced in the gentle breeze as she hummed a soft tune, her hands brushing the long stalks of corn. She felt at peace here, far from the noise of the village, wrapped in the embrace of nature. But this peace was about to be shattered. Unknown to her, a shadow had been following her for hours. Hiding behind the rows of corn, The figure moved with predatory precision, its eyes fixed on Isabella's every move. She was oblivious, her mind lost in thoughts of the upcoming harvest festival. The farm was isolated, miles from the nearest neighbor, and the afternoon silence added to her loneliness. The figure held a handkerchief in its gloved hand, the cloth soaked in a pungent chemical scent that would soon become the centerpiece of her nightmare. As Isabella bent down to pull grass from the soil, the figure attacked. In one swift, silent movement, they pressed the handkerchief to her mouth and nose. Her eyes widened in terror, her scream echoed as the acrid smell overwhelmed her senses. She clawed at the air, her body thrashing in a desperate attempt to break free, but the chemical was too strong. Her vision blurred, her limbs grew heavy, and within moments, she collapsed unconscious into the dirt. The golden afternoon light seemed to fade as darkness claimed her. For the next 2 hours, the farm became a stage for unspeakable horror. This figure, wrapped in malice, took from Isabella what no one should take, her innocence, her dignity, her light, and for 2 hours he raped her. The sun continued its slow arc across the sky, indifferent to the crime taking place below. The cornfields stood as silent witnesses, their leaves rustling softly in the wind, as if mourning the loss of the girl who had once danced among them. When Isabella finally stirred, the figure was gone. Her body ached, her mind was fogged with confusion and pain. She lay there in the dirt, her dress torn, the bloodstains on her pants telling the whole story, her soul shattered. Tears streamed down her face as the reality of what had happened crashed upon her like a tidal wave. She felt hollow, as if the essence of who she was had been stripped away, a shell of the vibrant girl she had been only hours before. The field, once her refuge, now seemed to her a graveyard of her innocence. As she struggled to get up, her trembling hands came across a piece of paper tucked into the pocket of her dress. Her heart sank as she opened it, her eyes scanning the words that would haunt her for years to come. Written on the note in a rough and cruel hand was, "Thank you for keeping me happy for 2 hours. I have never had so much fun before. What a thing you are. I don't want to enjoy this pleasure for free. I am paying for it. You are unparalleled in the whole village, different from the women in the whole village. We will meet again and enjoy ourselves again, my dear." A few coins lay scattered in the trash beside her, a grim mockery of the violation she had endured. Isabella's sobs echoed across the empty fields, her voice raw with anguish. The note slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the ground as she wrapped her arms around herself, trying to piece together the pieces of her shattered soul. The coins gleamed in the afternoon sun, a cruel reminder of the monster that had left them behind. She felt the weight of those words, "We will meet again," like a noose tightening around her neck. The village, her home, now felt like a hunting ground where she could never be safe. The once welcoming farm now loomed around her, its shadows long and ominous as the sun began to sink toward the horizon. Isabella staggered to her feet, her legs shaking beneath her, and stumbled toward the path that led back to the village. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the earth itself was trying to pull her back into the nightmare she had just escaped. Her innocence had been stolen, her trust in the world shattered, but inside her, a flicker of resilience burned. She would get through this. She had to. As she disappeared from the path, the field fell silent once more, notes and coins lying in the dirt like a dark promise of terror yet to come. Isabella's eyes fluttered open, the golden light of late afternoon piercing her senses. She lay in the dirt of her family's farm, her body trembling as the memories of the past 2 hours flooded back into her mind. An intense pain, both physical and emotional, surged through her, as if her soul had been ripped apart. Her dress was torn, her hands were caked with dirt and blood, and a deep, suffocating shame hung over her like a heavy fog. She retreated into herself, her sobs breaking the silence of the farm, each cry a raw testament to the innocence that had been stolen from her. Fear gripped her heart. Fear of the monster who had done this. Fear of the note's promise that they would meet again. Fear of the village's judging eyes. She felt utterly alone, as if the world had turned its back on her in its darkest moment. With trembling legs, Isabella forced herself to stand, her body screaming in protest. She couldn't stay here, not where the air still smelled of her violation. Clutching her torn robe to her chest, she stumbled toward the village, her destination clear in her mind. Father Mateo, the kind priest who had always been a beacon of peace in her life. The walk felt endless, each step a battle against the shame that threatened to swallow her whole. When she reached the small church, her face was streaked with tears, her eyes hollow with grief. Father Mateo was staring at the altar when Isabella burst through the door, her sobs echoing in the silent sanctuary. He turned, his faint smile fading as he took in her disheveled form. "Isabella, my child, what has happened?" he asked, his voice trembling with concern as he hurried toward her. She collapsed into his arms, her body shaking as she told her story between gasping sobs. The field, the handkerchief, the 2 hours of torment, the notes, the coins. Every word was a dagger to Father Mateo's heart, his face as it sank into the horror of his ordeal. He held her tightly, his own tears falling freely as he listened to the girl he had baptized, the girl he had seen become a kind and vibrant young woman, now broken before him. Father Mateo's heart shattered, a storm of emotions swirling within him. His sorrow for Isabella was met only with burning anger, a righteous anger that ran through his veins. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes filled with tears, his voice shaking with a mixture of grief and anger. "No one should have to endure such evil," he whispered, his hands shaking as he cupped her face. "I swear to you, Isabella, on my faith and my life, I will see justice done. This monster will not go unpunished." His words were a solemn pledge, a promise in the fire of his heartbreak as he held her close, determined to be her shield in the fight for justice before him. The sun was about to set in the village when Father Mateo's voice came from the church steps, calling the villagers to gather. His face was painted with determination, his eyes burning with the promise he had made to Isabella. Sensing the gravity of the situation, the villagers filed in, their murmurs filling the crisp morning air. Father Mateo stood tall, his voice steady but urgent, as he recounted Isabella's ordeal, leaving out the most painful details, but making it clear that a monster was walking among them. "We must find this demon," he announced, his eyes sweeping over the crowd. "If anyone knows anything, speak now." But the villagers exchanged anxious glances, their lips pursed. No one came forward with a clue, and silence hung heavy, a pall of fear over the gathering. As the days passed, an uneasy tension crept into the village. Strange whispers began to emerge, adding layers of suspense to the investigation. Some women, their faces pale and eyes wide with fear, spoke in hushed tones of the feeling of being watched in the fields. Others confessed to having small, inconspicuous gifts, wildflowers or trinkets, left on their doorsteps, but fear kept them silent. Father Mateo listened to these accounts with a growing sense of dread, realizing that Isabella's attack might not have been an isolated incident. The village, once a place of warmth and community, now felt like a hunting ground, its people stalked by an unseen predator. The women's silence, born of shame and terror, deepened the mystery, and Father Mateo knew he had to act decisively to break through the wall of fear. In a bold move, Father Mateo called another gathering, this time saying that the longer we delay justice, the more injustice will increase. Justice will be done today. The priest's order sent shivers through the crowd. The priest loudly ordered the monks to bring the water to a boil. "Today this injustice will end forever. Justice will be done. Boil the water so that justice will be done. Boil the water so that injustice will be done. Justice will be done today." The villagers already on the banks whispered among themselves, their fear growing. "Will Padre throw us into the boiling water to force a confession?" one man muttered, his voice trembling. The tension was palpable as they complied, gathering pots of steaming water in the village square, their eyes wide with fear. But Father Mateo had a different plan. He picked up the coins left at the site of Isabella's attack, mentioned in the defective note, and dropped them into the boiling water. The villagers trembled, confused, when they saw a thin layer of grease on the boiling water rose to the surface, glistening in the sunlight. Father Mateo's voice passed through the silence, sharp and commanding. "The culprit has been caught. Better come forward yourself." or I will tell you who the culprit is." Someone. No, everyone looks at each other questioningly. The priest's voice echoes. "Listen, listen, justice will be served. The criminal will be made a mark, so listen. These coins are wrapped in animal fat. Only a butcher could leave such a mark." The crowd turned in unison, their eyes fixed on the village butcher Daigo. His face, usually red with a happy smile, turned pale as the weight of their gaze fell on him. Daigo's hands were shaking, beads of sweat rolling down his temples. I don't know what you're talking about." But the evidence was undeniable, and the villagers' fear turned to anger. Father Mateo stepped forward, his voice low. "Daigo, you will answer for this." The quest for justice had found its target, and the village prepared for a reckoning. The village square was a hive of tension, the air thick with the weight of accusations. Diego stood in the center, his entire body trembling under the collective gaze of the villagers. Father Mateo's revelation about the animal fat on the coins had stripped away his facade, exposing him as the predator who had terrorized Isabella. The murmur of the crowd turned to a roar of outrage, their fear to a demand for justice. Diego's eyes were searching desperately for escape, but there was no one there. Father Mateo stepped closer, his voice a low, unwavering command. "Confess, Diego. Whether you speak or not, the truth will come out." The villagers pressed, their anger a palpable force, and Diego's resolve broke. "I did it," he spat, his voice cracking with despair. "I attacked Isabella. I left notes, coins, everything." There was a collective gasp in the crowd, but Diego was not finished. His confession, though it was forced, seemed to release a floodgate of guilt and deviance. He laughed bitterly, a hollow, cold voice. "But she wasn't the first. You think I'm the only monster here? You all rolled your eyes." The villagers froze, their anger giving way to confusion and fear. Father Mateo's heart sank as he said, "What do you mean, Diego? Speak plainly." Diego's gaze turned cold, his words cutting through the crowd like blades. "9 women," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "Before Isabella, there were 9 other women with whom I had done everything, but they were brave. They enjoyed it. They didn't tell anyone, and I didn't give them a single coin. I took whatever I wanted, and they didn't say anything, but she told me everything. She couldn't bear it. If she hadn't told anyone, she would have made him rich. What wealth is there? Listen, villagers, I will die, but my children are still in this village, born of your women, but they didn't tell anyone for fear of shame and ruin. Listen, 4 of these 9 women, married women, also gave birth to my children, but they hid the truth, raised them in silence." He kept laughing. His words struck the village like thunder, the weight of his words shattering the fragile peace they had clung to. Father Mateo staggered back, his mind reeling as the full scope of Diego's misery unfolded. 9 women, 9 lives destroyed, their pain buried in layers of fear and social pressure. Children, innocent lives marked by a father's sin, growing up in the shadow of a secret too heavy to bear. Isabella, standing on the edge of the square with her arms wrapped around her, felt the ground shift beneath her. The horror of her own experience was now multiplied by the knowledge that she was not alone, one that others had endured in silence, their voices drowned in the same shame that nearly consumed her. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at the faces of the women in the crowd, wondering which of them had endured Diego's cruelty. The village. The villagers were also in shock, their anger replaced by a deep collective grief. Mothers held their daughters close, husbands looked at their wives with new fear, and Diego's unborn children, now whispering in the crowd, became living proof of the village's failure to protect itself. Father Mateo's voice broke the silence, trembling with a mixture of sorrow and anger. "How can this be?" he whispered more to himself than to Diego. "How can we not see?" He turned to the villagers, his eyes burning with a determination that hid the brokenness in his heart. "This is ending now. No more silence, no more shame. We will heal as a community, but first, Diego will have to face the consequences of his actions." Isabella's sobs rose, her body shaking as the emotional weight of the revelation crashed down on her. Other women, some of whom had been victims of Diego, began to step forward, their silence finally broken as they told their stories, their voices a combination of pain and humiliation. The village square, once a place of celebration, became a stage for truth, a painful but necessary reckoning that would forever change the fabric of their community. Justice for Daigo came quickly. The villagers, united in their grief and anger, agreed on a punishment that would serve as a stark reminder of the consequences of such evil. For 3 days, Daigo was bound and hung in the village square, not to die, but to bear the shame and scorn of those he had wronged. His filth-ridden body sank under the weight of his crimes, his eyes hollow as the villagers passed by, some spitting at his feet, others whispering to the souls he had stained. Children were brought to meet him, their parents explaining in hushed tones the importance of justice, ensuring that Daigo's fate would be a lesson in the village's memory for generations. A glimmer of hope emerged for Isabella amid the darkness. Father Mateo, determined to restore her honor, arranged for her to marry his son, Juan, a kind young man who had long admired Isabella's gentle nature. The wedding was a quiet affair, held in the church that had been Isabella's refuge in her darkest hour. As she stood before Juan, her hands trembling but her heart slowly healing, Isabella felt the stirrings of a new beginning. Juan's eyes were filled with love and understanding, a silent promise that he would honor her, protect her, and help her heal. The villagers, observing the union, cried tears of joy, their faith in goodness restored by the sight of Isabella, helped by a man who saw her not as a victim, but as a survivor. In the days that followed, Father Mateo called Isabella to church one last time. The morning light filtered through the stained glass windows, casting a warm glow on the altar as he held a small wooden cross, its edges worn by years of prayers. "This was my mother's," he said, his voice emotional as he placed it in Isabella's hand. "It has seen me through my darkest days, and now it will see you through you." Isabella clutched the cross to her chest, tears welling up in her eyes as she looked at the man who had become her protector, her guide, her father in every way that mattered. Father Mateo's eyes softened, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. "I promise you, Isabella, I will always be here to keep you safe. You are not alone, and you never will be." As Isabella walked out of the church, the crucifix hanging around her neck, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The village, though shaken by the revelations of Diego's crimes, was beginning to heal. The women who had suffered in silence found strength in their shared truth, and the community pledged to protect themselves with a vigilance they had previously lacked. Isabella, with Juan and Father Mateo's promise in her heart, went into her new life, a survivor ready to face the future with courage and hope. This story is a never-ending search for pain and justice, where Isabella reveals the truth written in her blood and exposes a dark secret of the village. Will Diego's punishments be able to bring peace to the village? Will Isabella be able to escape her past? The full story behind the scenes of this dramatic reality resonates with grief, pain, and revenge, and the dream of justice becomes an unbreakable reality. If you liked this story, subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends, so that more such thrilling stories reach you. Until then, keep the light of justice burning in your hearts.